Hey guys, this is Lisa here, and today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful Labradorite beaded bangle bracelet. So stick around and get ready to create. To create this piece, we're going to need some materials. To start, we're going to need this 20 gauge wire cut at 22 inches, and I've made a mark at about the 9-inch point. We're also going to need another piece of 20 gauge wire cut at 10 inches long. We'll need 7 pieces of 24 gauge wire cut at 6 inches in length. We're going to need 8 rainbow labradorite beads, 6 millimeters each. We'll need 16 silver beads at 14 millimeters each. We're going to need a pair of chain nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters, a pair of looping or round nose pliers, as you see here, but I'm going to use the looping pliers. We're going to need a chasing hammer. We'll need a bench block and some kind of mandrel that measures approximately 55 millimeters in diameter. If you have a bracelet mandrel, that's perfect. If you need to see a complete list of materials, please check out my description below. And let's get started on this project. First, we're going to grab that 22-inch piece of silver wire, and I've made a mark here at 9 inches in from one of the ends. I'm going to grab my looping pliers and work with this 7 millimeter barrel. And I'm going to grab right at that mark I made. This is going to be the bail part of my bracelet. So there, I'm going to grab it. I'm going to wrap the wire around that barrel all the way around until both wires intersect, and basically each end forms a line, a straight line across, just like that. Now we're going to pull that off the mandrel. And now you can see I have a nice little loop for my bail at the end of the bracelet. Now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers, and almost directly from the top of the mark on that circle there, I'm going to make one of my wires go straight up. So I'm just going to go slightly to the right of that mark and then bend that wire straight up, just like that. And then I'm going to grab the other side just a little bit in and away from the other wire. And then I'm going to bend that wire straight up as well. And then here you can see I pulled them both straight up. And I do have a little extra on one end, and that's on purpose. You'll see that later in the video. We're going to set that down, and then we're going to grab our 10-inch piece of wire, and we're going to place that wire right between the two longer parts of this previous piece that we've started. And I'm going to have about an inch of a tail at the end of that wire that starts at the base of that circle we made. So as you can see here, there's about an inch in length from the base of the circle. So this is going to wrap around. So what I'm going to do is bend that wire in a 90-degree angle there, right at the base of that circle. With my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab all 3 wires right up next to each other, nice and flush. And I'm going to push this wire around to the back side of the bracelet. This is a little bit difficult to do. I almost need 3 hands to do this. but the starting part is the hardest. So there, I've got it wrapped around to the back. And now with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to just snug that wire up against this bracelet, the beginning part of this bracelet. And then I'm going to get that wire pulled around to the front here in just a moment. So I'm going to snug that up against the back. And then I'm going to cross this wire over the previous wrap and bring it below the bottom of that wrap. So we're going to wrap going down from the circle. So there's our second wrap. We're going to do a total of 3 wraps. So here we're beginning our third wrap around, all the way to the front side here. And I'm going to use those chain nose pliers to help me press that wire down since it's getting shorter. Okay, no, I'm using my fingers. You can use your chain nose pliers to press it down. It'd probably be easier than using your fingers, but I use my fingers a lot. I've been told I have really strong hands. I did not realize that. But here we go. We're bending this around and then pressing it down. I'm going to grab my flush cutters and cut that wire, that tail end of the wire, right at the middle of the back of that bracelet. And we're going to snug that little tail end down, burnish it down to those 3 wires. Now we're going to grab our bench block and our chasing hammer and harden this bail. And there you can see that is completed. Now we're going to take the 3 ends of this wire and splay them out. Grab our 4mm silver beads and 6mm rainbow labradorite beads. Grabbing our first 4mm silver bead, we're going to pop that right there on the center wire. And we're going to push it all the way down as far as that will sit nicely in there. And then grab our rainbow labradorite bead. Look how pretty that is. And pop that on the middle wire as well. Bringing it all the way down to sit right next to the silver bead. And then we're going to pop on that last 4mm silver bead. Now we're going to take our 2 wires and wrap them closely up against the beads, making what I call a little pea pod, because that's what it looks like. And I'm going to bend the side wires up to lay next to that middle wire again. And now we're going to take that 24 gauge wrapping wire and we're going to put it behind that middle wire and wrap the middle wire 3 times. So 1 time there, and 2 times, and then 1 more time. And we are going to lock those first 3 beads in. So we're going to make sure these tail end of the wire are also behind your bracelet on the back side. And I'm going to wrap all 3 of my wires together, nice and snug. And as you can see, they're not laying flat together. So I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and just smush those wires so that they all lay up right next to each other, nice and flat. And then I'm also pushing that wrap right up against the other 3 wraps as much as I can. And then I'm going to move my chain nose pliers up a bit. I'm going to grab the tail end of my wrapping wire and wrap around. And I'm going to wrap 5 wraps around these 3 wires. So there's the 3rd wrap. And I'm going to push up against them and tighten each one as I go. There's my 4th wrap. and then my 5th wrap. Pushing it up, tightening it down. And there you can see I've got all 3 wires wrapped nice and tight, and that first pea pod is nice and locked in. So all 3 beads are nice and locked in, they're not going to slip around. Now we're going to splay these wires out again, like we did at the beginning, and I'm going to wrap that middle wire 3 times with the tail end of this weaving wire. So making sure I get it in there nice and snug, as tightly as I can. I'm going to wrap around, so there's my first wrap, my second wrap, and my third wrap. And then again, push all those wraps nice and snug as far as they'll go. Turn my piece over, make sure it's snug on the back side and pulled nice and tight. Now we need to cut our tail ends off. So I'm going to grab my flush cutters and cut that right to the right side of where my wraps are. Just like that. And then on the other one, I'm going to cut just to the left side of my wraps. So you want the wrap to come up over the top of your wire when you cut it off. The reason for that is I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and I'm going to burnish the end of that wire down against the wire. That will just keep that wire from coming up and poking someone, especially if it's on your wrist or anything like that. You don't want to feel those little wires scratching on your wrist. So here I'm burnishing that one down. There we go. And now all nice and smooth. And now we've got that first wrapped area finished. So now we're gonna repeat the last step. So I'm speeding up the video a little bit here just because I didn't want y'all to get bored. But there's your first bead, the 4mm silver, and your 6mm rainbow Labradorite bead. Popping that on. And then we need the 4mm silver bead. Like so. And then we're going to make our little pea pod. Wrap it around, then straighten up that wire. Wrap it around, straighten up the wire so that they all lay flush at the top. And then we're going to grab the 24 gauge weaving wire. And I'm going to wrap around that middle wire just like we did earlier. Pushing that up against the bead there. That was 1 wrap. 2 wraps, and 3 wraps. And we make sure it's nice and snug and tight. I'm going to wrap around all 3 wires now. Push that wrap up snug against the other 3 wraps, and continue wrapping 5 wraps in total around all 3 wires. There's 4 and there's 5. And there you can see our first 2 pods are done. Again, splay out both those wires. And we're going to wrap around the middle wire to secure this wrap. So there's 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to press that in, flip it over, flush cut our ends so that the wire goes over the top of the other base wire. And then with our chain nose pliers, we're going to burnish that wire down against the base wire. I'm going to burnish this side down, and there it's all smooth and ready. And there's the first two complete. And now we're going to rinse and repeat. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pea pods. And on the 8th one, I'm going to show you how to do that because this is how we end the bracelet. So I'm grabbing my 4mm silver bead, just as we did earlier, popping that on, grabbing a 6mm rainbow Labradorite bead, popping that one on there, and another 4mm silver bead. And I'll tell you what, with these bright lights and that silver, it is so hard to find the hole. There we go. And now we've got all 3. Now we're going to do our little pea pod wrap there. Straighten the end of the wire up. Doing the same on the other side. Straightening the wire up. Now this is where we're going to do something different. I'm going to grab the right side of my pea pod wire and bring it around the back side of those 2 wires that are now left. And I'm going to wrap this wire around those 2 wires, and with my chain nose pliers I'm going to snug those up. I'm going to turn it over and make sure I flatten this wire down. We want the back side of that pea pod wire to be up on the side of our beads. And there you see I've got that full wrap. Now this longer wire on the top, I'm going to take that and bend it in half and put the tail end in between these 2 wires. I realized later I'd probably rather do this step first before I wrap that first wrap. It would just make this a little bit more secure. So I would recommend doing that before you do this wrap, bending this wire and pressing it down in between these 2 wires. So I would do that bend, do your wrap, and then we're going to cut off the other wire to make that a little bit shorter because we don't want that wire sticking out the end of our bracelet. So we're going to cut this probably about 1/8 of an inch above the top of that first single wrap. Just like that. And ensuring that that wire is in the middle of the other 2 wires, I'm going to take this little outside edge wire and just bend it out so that it sits flush up against that middle wire, so it will just stay nice and flush there. And I can grab all 3 wires with my chain nose pliers now, and I'm going to continue wrapping around all 3 of these wires. So there's 3 wraps and then 4 wraps. If you'd like to do 5, you can do that. But I usually just do 4 here. And wrap that last little bit of wire into the wraps. The little wire that was coming up on the left side is wrapped in now. And there's the tail end of that wire after I flush cut that wire, and then I burnish it against the back side of the bracelet. Now with my bench block and chasing hammer, I'm going to flatten this wire but also harden it because this is going to become our clasp. Now we're going to bend this wire up toward the back side of our bracelet, like this. So we're doing like a little 45-degree bend there. And with my bail making or loop making pliers, looping pliers, I'm going to grab this wire at the 7mm post, but then I realize I don't want the 7mm, so I drop down to about the 5mm post, and I then wrap that wire around toward the front of the bracelet. You want the end of this to go toward the front of your bracelet. Wrapping it nice and snug until we have a nice little clasp. So now we're going to take our mandrel, which in this case is an aerosol can, and I'm going to wrap this around this can. If you have a bracelet mandrel, you can use that. This bracelet measures at about 7.5 inches long. So whatever that transcribes to on your bracelet mandrel, you can use that. And then I'm just going to make this into a little bit more of an oval shape. It fits on the wrist a lot better than just a circle. And there is my completed bangle. Look how beautiful those beads are. They just catch the light and show that little flash of blue light or blue in it. Here's another one I made with a lighter Labradorite bead. And there's the clasp. And there it is in the outside light. So these darker beads look a little bit lighter outside and show that Labradorite bead off just beautifully. What'd you guys think of this project? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you all next Thursday. Thanks for watching.